You're listening to the Raw Honeys podcast, the place to be real, be love, and be friend. Join Chelsea Fine, Heather Hildenbrand, and me, Amanda Axel. We're real friends who aren't afraid to talk about the raw truth of real life. If you're looking for a group of girlfriends who will support and encourage you when the going gets tough, this is the place to be. Pull up a chair, grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, and enjoy the show. Oh, that reminds me. I had a weird, spiritually feeling kind of dream last night. I don't know what it was about.
Interesting. Was it about history being unveiled in a new sense, so that the last 2,000 years we are able to reframe it and see it in a more understandable way, and so we break free of the religious constructs by the year 2030?
No, but I'm guessing that's what your dream was about.
So fucking specific.
It was really fucking.
I really wanted Amanda to be like, "How did you know?"
I know
that would have been amazing.
I wouldn't have been surprised if Amanda had been like, "Actually, yes." No, I was dreaming about that so much so, and I woke up and I was like, "Should I write this down? Is this crazy, Chelsea? Is this important?"
Actually, that does sound pretty important.
I had an invention dream, so I think that we're all getting messages. And I'm not going to tell you about mine right now because we're recording, and it's not that I don't trust you, broads, but this is a really good invention, and I don't want to give our idea away to anybody else. So I'm going to tell you in secret one time.
Okay. All
right.
Word to your mother. All right. I should stop singing random phrases.
It's
You
fine.
should never
it's
stop.
totally fine. I think
Never
you should
stop.
sing random.
So it works out.
I love to sing random. It's just, I feel like whenever I sing a random song, nobody's going to get it.
We always get it. One of us always gets it.
Always. I was thinking about calling this episode, Are You Lonesome Tonight? Like the Elvis song. But I was like, nobody knows. Does anyone even know that song?
I know that song.
See, one of us.
Are you lonesome tonight? That's a terrible Elvis.
Whoa.
Ugh, I gotta work on that.
That was like Elvis as an old man. That's
What about what is that song? The blue, right? Isn't that oh so lonesome for you? What's her name? Leanne Rimes? No, that's not her.
Wasn't that one of her first songs that came out when she was 12 or whatever?
It was 1996.
Yeah.
I might have had that CD actually.
For you.
So the only song I can think about loneliness is Hotline Bling.
What song is Hotline Bling? All right, I have so many ideas in my head.
Heather, I don't think we're familiar with that one. Can you?
Is it shaking like a Polaroid picture? I'm just seeing a bunch of
and
girls.
I'm not going to be tricked into this. I'm just saying I can't think about.
You brought it up.
She's trying.
I can't think of any actual songs about loneliness now that I'm trying to do it. It'll probably hit me when we hang up.
Considering there's a loneliness epidemic, I'm really surprised that there's not more.
I know. Well, I mean, all the songs are about the opposite of that, right? They're about having somebody.
What about one is the loneliest number? Do you know that song? Two could be as bad as one. It's the loneliest number since the number one. One is the loneliest number one. Just listen. Not in a singing place today, guys. It's not my best work.
It was fantastic. I
enjoyed
know of the song. I didn't know those were the words. So it was educational.
Yeah.
I'm here to teach.
We want to talk about loneliness today. So something that we noticed, with, in our Facebook group, we love our Facebook group. We love the honeys in there. But there's been kind of a theme that, a lot of us are feeling lonely and left out in a lot of situations. And it turns out that it's not really that uncommon. And so kind of looking more into that, there's actually a loneliness epidemic. It's been named the Loneliness Epidemic. And there's just crazy, crazy stats about how Cigna did a study that showed that most adults over the age of 18 consider themselves to be lonely, and that Generation Z, which is people who are born between the mid 1990s and the early 2000s, the younger generation, they're the loneliest of all. And even though they have social media and it seems we have the illusion that we're connected all the time, they're actually extremely lonely. And they also found that having a lack of human connection is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So it actually has a lot of harmful effects, you know? I mean, for me, I never really thought about this much because personally, I don't get lonely very often. It's pretty rare. And so I didn't realize, you know, off the bat that this was such a huge problem. But when we had talked about it before, you guys, like, was it surprising to you?
I don't know if it was surprising. It was disappointing and it was sad, but I don't think it's surprising because I do see that. I don't know if I've necessarily felt it in terms of what we're talking about here, just on a lifestyle basis. Anytime I've ever felt lonely was more like a situational depression that I had gone through, a hard situation where I had isolated myself, or I felt isolated because of my circumstance. And what we're talking about here is kind of a lifestyle loneliness where people aren't going through any particular trauma and experiencing it as a result of that, but it's just kind of like everyday life. And this is the result of it. And I see it. I see it in other people. I see it in just people's lack of involvement with each other. I see it in social media and how people consider their social media friendships their friendships. Like there is no differentiation, or their only friends are online. And how so one has replaced the other, you know? And so I'm sure we'll talk about social media and how that's impacted it, because in my opinion, that's probably been the biggest impact against this, but I do see it. So sadly, I'm not surprised. But I am passionate about wanting to talk about this, to bring it more to light, because we want to encourage, you know, women especially, because that's our audience, that's what we are, that's where we're coming from with this, to not let this be them, to not continue to let this be them, or to help somebody else who does identify with this by befriending them, you know, in real life, people, in real life, not just online.
Yeah, IRL people.
That's right. That's right.
Did I say it right?
Yeah, you nailed it.
Oh my gosh. What about you, Chelsea? I mean, did it surprise you?
I think if we were talking about this like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I would say yes, because I would just say yes. That, I guess my perception of the world is that there's just so many people in it. Loneliness must be, you know, a sort of somewhat rare occurrence, like true loneliness. However, for the last like 3 or 4 years, I've been doing talk therapy, and I've been doing like these this like listening kind of work where I talk to women one-on-one and basically kind of have like talk therapy sessions where I just empathize and listen and show up to help support whatever their feelings are. And over my years doing that, I want to say 100% of the women that I have sat in that room with have expressed some form of loneliness in a really, deep and true way. And it's interesting, guys, because usually that part of our like session together, they don't come to that realization, or at least that verbal acknowledgement of loneliness, until like at least 3/4 of the way through. So it's almost like I think a lot of us either aren't even aware of how lonely we are, or if we are aware, we try to avoid acknowledging it so much because it's painful, you know, that we sort of live our lives as though we're not. I mean, clearly that's what we do, especially given the digital world now and how we can have all these digital connections that make us feel, I don't know, connected or valuable, or however you want to assign that feeling. So it doesn't surprise me right now, but that's only because I do spend, you know, this one-on-one like intensive time with women, and every time a woman communicates something like that, like loneliness or that sense of like a hole inside them or whatever, like I can relate. I can feel that at the same time. And I think we maybe as a collective sort of feel that, right? Like a connectivity, like a hole in our connectivity centers or something. So it doesn't surprise me, but it does make me heartbroken, because it is an unnecessary epidemic. Any epidemic should really be unnecessary, but you know, it perhaps is the most important thing, connection.
Right. So here's a stat from Vivek Murthy, who is the former Surgeon General. And it said that loneliness rates have actually doubled since the 1980s. And so like you're saying, Chelsea, like just in the past few years, you've really been able to have these sort of dialogues where you're seeing this more and more. So, I mean, why do you guys think that this has become such an issue in the last 30 years? I mean, Heather mentioned social media. I mean, like, what is it? Like, what's different?
Yeah, I mean, I think social media has a lot to do with it. And not just because, okay, for one thing, social media is an illusion of connection, right? We think that it is. We think that we're connecting with people, but we're not, because there's a level of separation that it's never going to replace the connection that we're looking for, trying to use a screen in between you and another person. But not just that, but, I think it's also made people become different versions of themselves. So it's being used to spread a lot more conflict and discord and hate than, you would probably do to somebody's face. So social media as this like haven has now also become, part of the problem. It's become a scary place too. It's a place where everybody's going to think they're connected, but it's also the enemy at the same time. So that's part of it. I don't know. And maybe this is just like my age and naivety talking, because we're talking about an era that's the only era I've ever lived in. I'm not old enough to know what it was like firsthand in the 60s and 70s. But I have to wonder, too, if part of the problem is that people just feel misunderstood more than ever, because I can relate to that. And I see a lot of social groups that can relate to that. Since the 80s, a lot of what we consider like political issues, which I consider people issues, have become more, have come more to the forefront. They're more in the spotlight, but because of that, we have people coming forward that identify with these social groups. And then because of that, we have people that are not afraid to verbalize that they are against an entire social group of people, right? So there's just a lot more. When you get off of social media and you go out into the world, there's probably also a lot more division, and people just feeling like maybe they can't find their people. Anytime I've ever felt anything resembling loneliness, it's not because there's a lack of people around, because you can feel lonely in a crowded room. The times that I have felt lonely have been when there's a lack of people that understand and support and empathize with me in my proximity. Again, I don't know. I say it's more like this than ever, but that also just might be because I wasn't around to see what it was like in the 60s, 70s, or any time before that. But I feel for me like that could be a contributing factor, that we just feel just more disconnected, even standing right next to each other than we ever have.
Humans are really pack animals, right? Like we are meant to live in communities where, we don't just live by ourselves or even with just one or two or three other people, right? Like we're meant to interact with human beings and touch each other and look into each other's eyes like all the time, right? And that's kind of what I was thinking too. But, as you were talking and you were saying that the loneliest times, what were the loneliest times you've ever felt? And even though for me, I experience loneliness very rarely, what I do notice is that when I do experience loneliness, it's when I'm in really deep pain. And this is very fresh for me because of, my recent experience with Lonnie. When she was sick, my husband was out of town. Heather, you were out of town.
I know. I was like, are you kidding? Everyone's gone.
And, my parents don't live nearby. And you know what I mean? So it's like, and I have support. Like I had friends come over, but like for the most part, I was alone a lot of the day and I was in excruciating pain. And for me, when I'm in excruciating pain, I need people around me. Like usually what I do is I call on people to insulate me. Like when my dad died, I told Joe, my husband, he said, what do you need me to do? And I said, call my friends, tell them to come over, because I just wanted them to like sit around me in a circle and like insulate me, in their, in their bodies, basically, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I felt that lack of connectedness because of my pain. And so the reason I bring all this up is because I wonder if, really the root cause of this loneliness is just because so many of us have such deep suffering, which may be caused exactly like you said, like, we feel misunderstood or we're experiencing division in our day-to-day life, or what, I mean, anything, there's so many causes of pain, but I wonder if that's really the root cause. What do you think, Chelsea?
All of these things that you guys are talking about, they all contribute. They must, right? Because everything is connected, I guess. At the end of the day, everything really is connected. So it's certainly a combination of things. But, I think what we've done is sort of, we've assigned like social value and personal value to like these non-tangible things, these non-present, unrealistic, high pressure, barely satisfying kind of things. But we have told ourselves as a collective that these are the things that give us nutrients or whatever, as far as life and growth. And these are the things to live up to, and these are the things to want. So it's almost like we redefined what our social currency was going to be as far as exchange with one another. So when we take out like the physical presence of friends or family or just people that you trust or whatever, you take that out, you are physically left alone, right? You are physically isolated. And so we tap into like these digital platforms that are supposed to fill that void for us. And to a certain extent, I guess they do, if we reset our personal value system to kind of match whatever social media or whatever digital content is telling us is important at the time. But what the problem is that we can't fool our makeup. We cannot trick nature into thinking that we are not biological, physiological human beings that need and require human connectivity to thrive. So I think what's happening here is we have just stopped thriving. And so we are existing. We are barely existing to a certain extent because we are getting worse and worse. We're getting more sick as time goes on. And barely existing makes us feel like we're not important, no matter how many followers you have or how many likes you have. And so when you lack that sense of personal self-worth or personal value, you probably just stopped trying to find purpose and meaning and value in life as a whole. Because why would you want to be part of something that's valuable, but you're not worthy of it, right? And so then what that leads to is us no longer asking the question, like, what's the meaning of life? And what is my purpose here? And what can I accomplish with this existence of mine? Not that all people would ask those questions anyway, but I think that we have almost stopped asking those deeper, personal, intimate questions of ourselves in recent years because it hurts to even explore that. Because, well, currently we think we only matter based on whatever numbers we can look up, or our friend count, or how many people. Yeah, I don't know. We're just using a weird mathematical, like weird currency structure that's not even real, and we're trying to live up to these unreal things. Of course, we're just failing, and failure is not part of our human directive. It's not. We're meant to explore, and we're meant to learn from mistakes and then move on and grow. And I think what's happened is we've hit a wall, and nobody knows how to grow from here.
It's like being in survival mode. So when you are hungry, all you can think about is that you're hungry and that you need food. And if you're well fed and you're not worried about where your next meal is going to come from, then your mind opens up to the things that go beyond surviving. And those are the things that you're talking about, the questions that we have stopped asking, like what's the meaning of life and what's my purpose here? Those are things that we can only wonder and give energy to if our survival needs are being met. And when we are lonely to the detriment of our mental and our physical health, that's a survival mode issue. So we are too stuck in survival mode and don't even know it. We're starving and don't even know it. And so, of course we can't move past that into the bigger questions or the deeper, more emotional, like emotionally satisfying areas of our life,
surviving on candy or cotton candy instead of fruits and vegetables and stuff. Exactly like what you're saying, like no nutrition there. And we've also lost our, at least in our culture, we've lost our mentor teacher kind of natural hierarchy of life and generational, living and passing things down. We actually have, we have gotten so far away from teaching the younger generations how to feel, how to process, how to be brave, how to dream, how to find personal value on their own if need be, right? Like those are things that we definitely are born with some sense of like an innate knowing of some of those things, right? But the whole point of society and civilization, I guess, in fact, is to cultivate those very things with one another as a collective so that we're all kind of growing up in a world that takes care of us. And it's just so much easier to check out and click buttons and stare at screens all day than it is to like engage emotionally with our own sense of, I don't know, despair, or somebody else's sense of despair. Empathy, like what you were saying a minute ago. Like our empathy structures have just crumbled and we're not really trying very hard to rebuild them. And without empathy, nobody can feel heard or loved or seen or important, you know?
One of the conversations that you have to have about this then is okay, so we're not connecting enough with each other in a physical way, like, you know, versus virtual. What do we do about that? What does it mean to connect with somebody? And I think every time I go back and think about this, I think empathy. I think that's one of the basic foundations that I think a friendship is built on. Is there's so many times you have to show up for somebody, for a friend. There's so many times. And showing up is just having empathy. It's just meeting them where they are, and you can't fix it. And you don't need to. It's just showing up where they are and just being in that place with them. And that is empathy. And, you know, it goes back to what I was saying about how I think maybe a lot of us just feel, you know, misunderstood, or we're standing in a room full of people, in a room full of enemies almost, or something, you know. And all that it would take to change that with just one person is just to show empathy for where they are. And I think it would completely change the dynamic between those two people, even if they were strangers the moment before that, you know. That I can't even imagine if that's all that we changed was this campaign of empathy for people, how different
exactly
the world would
well, and we're on a
like
trajectory that almost conditions us to do the opposite, because empathy, which costs us nothing, and it actually feeds us. It actually feels good and feels very satisfying to meet someone in their place and accept them in that moment. But that word accept right there, like we are almost through digital media and media in general, and I don't know, our society today is we're almost conditioned to not accept others as they are, even though I understand that the overt message is not that, but it's kind of the default messaging. Like everybody needs to be like accepting people how they are, broken or crying or hurt or angry, is something we're so sort of trained not to do, and to instead maybe help reshape people into a more appropriate or traditional kind of shape or role. And if we stop accepting people, we cannot show them authentic empathy, you know? And so then what we're in a room full of enemies, and those enemies are our competitors, essentially. And if you're competing with the people who are supposed to be your tribe, somebody always dies. I mean, that's what survival of the fittest is. And it's sad, because we're above this. We're better than this. We spent millennia becoming a civilization as a species so that we could get beyond these more petty, kind of baser sort of instincts, you know, like these reptilian, like mine, me, you know. And
if empathy is a barrier, how do we overcome that to combat this loneliness?
I think vulnerability is probably our most powerful tool.
Yes.
I totally agree with you. Totally 100% agree with you. But I think that people, they're too afraid to be vulnerable because we lack empathy, right? Like if we show ourselves and they don't accept us, or they don't respond in a empathetic or loving way, even if it's not necessarily accepting, you know, I mean, how do we do that? Like how do we have the courage to show ourselves?
That's a great question, but I think that there's two brave things that need to happen. One is that you open yourself up to allow someone else to accept you, and the other is that you go accept someone else before they even ask. And so if opening yourself up first is scarier, then just go accept somebody else before they even ask. You know, that is something that, like Chelsea said, it doesn't cost you anything to do that one. I mean, that's the domino effect right there. If everyone went and accepted one person that wasn't asking to be accepted, your acceptance could be rejected, you know, and that's something for sure. And so, you know, that could potentially hurt if you're already sensitive and lonely, but that's the work. Like Brene Brown talks about this. I love everything she has to say about vulnerability. And I think it goes hand in hand with what we're talking about here, because I do think the solution is like what Chelsea was saying with empathy, and it can't happen without bravery. But the thing is, at one time, this wasn't really considered bravery. This was just called making friends. I mean, dug ourselves into this hole, and now it's going to take what we consider courage to get back out into a place where it's just called making friends. You put yourself out there, and you are for some people, and you are not for other people, but the people that you're not for don't have to become your enemy.
Yep.
We were talking about this at the beginning of the call. We were kind of like bitching about school. And I think one of the things that should be taught in school alongside, balancing your checkbook or reading your tax return is how to make friends. And it's so basic that we forgot that we need to say it out loud, I guess. It's not a no-brainer. It is complicated because nobody teaches you the ins and outs of this. Nobody just tells you that it is scary to put yourself out there, or that it is scary to accept other people the way they are. Nobody talks about that. And maybe we need to be talking about that more in a way that's like a lesson.
Generally speaking, the traditional school, like classroom, is set up with all the seats facing forward, right? Which is good for focus and learning and stuff. But what that creates is an environment where every single student is facing one direction and there's no other students looking at them or making eye contact. And again, great for not having distractions, but not good for bonding and not good for those undertones of camaraderie and that the silent kind of friendship building that happens through eye contact, through laughing at the same thing at the same time, through noticing when somebody, I don't know, is maybe crying but trying to hide it. Like these things that we are taught to either ignore or not verbalize. I think that it sort of hurts us. And I'm using school as an example because that's where our younger generations are getting the most of their physical interaction. And can I just say that's another big thing though? Like eye contact, when it comes to vulnerability and acceptance, I firmly, firmly believe that when we are making eye contact with someone, friend or foe or anyone, there is a much higher probability of acceptance and empathy and vulnerability, all those things being reciprocated and included in a safe way between the two people making eye contact. Because I do believe that our eye contact conveys our sincerity in a way that words and actions and anything else just really can't match, and
that's why social media can become the enemy so quickly, because you can't see, you don't have to face.
And there's a problem
with
that. Like, there's a problem with that. You should be able to face your opponent if you're going to kill them, and you should be able to face a stranger if you want to make friends, and you should be able to face a loved one if you want to provide empathy or show vulnerability. Like facing one another that's what emotional intelligence is based on.
So one of the loneliest people that I know, or someone who experiences a lot of loneliness, doesn't have trouble meeting people and like making new friends, but like has trouble fostering those friendships. And that's something we talk about all the time, is like you have to be really intentional about cultivating these kind of relationships and investing in them, not just for the sake of that person, but for the sake of you, right? Like for your own soul's nourishment, right?
And that's actually a really great point to make, because I will say that, I have very introverted tendencies. And one of the reasons I've never really experienced loneliness, at least to the extent that we're talking about here today, is because I got really great with being alone. I've always really enjoyed my own company. And so being alone doesn't automatically equal loneliness, or I'll be the first to tell you that friendship for me feels like a lot of work, and it's a lot of work for everyone, but for me, it feels like a lot of work.
Sure,
And I think that's true for a lot of introverts, because there is an expense of energy that is happening on a level that doesn't happen if you're not introverted. So it exhausts, right? Even when you're having fun or whatever, it exhausts. And so there has to be like a really deliberate commitment to foster a friendship, because what that deliberate commitment means is that you are telling yourself that you're going to show up even when you don't feel like it, even when you don't have the energy. And that's friendship anyway for everyone. And that's another thing we should be telling people. Friendship is showing up even when you don't feel like it. You aren't going to always feel like it. Even if you love the person, you're not going to always feel like, I'm a mom. I have 2 teenagers and a husband and a really busy life and a family that I'm still navigating. And so a normal day can feel exhausting. And if at the end of that day, a friend calls you and needs you, you're maybe going to be running on empty. It's not because you don't care about them. It's just a fact. You're just exhausted, you know? But friendship is like, you're going to show up anyway, every time you possibly can. And with love every time you possibly can, because you've made this commitment that you are nurturing this thing.
That's beautiful. Like friendship is showing up even when you don't want to. And I would add to that, and love is showing up especially when you don't want to. That actually is the difference between a healthy friendship or an intimate friendship or whatever. The really great, wonderful relationships compared to an average relationship, the difference is that line right there, especially when you're at your worst, especially when you have nothing to give. Showing up, however that looks to your friend, that's all you have to do. That's all you have to do. And it speaks volumes, you know?
I mean, but like just to qualify that though, because Amanda's talking about, you know, some people who have no shortage of quote unquote friends, but nothing is really connected enough to feel meaningful to stave off the loneliness. And I think that goes to then choosing carefully, because that's another thing we don't talk about that I talk to my kids about all the time. I'm like, hey, remember that thing they told you in kindergarten? It's wrong. You do not have to be friends with everyone, because not everyone is a friend for you. And so when you are expelling all this energy we're talking about and pouring into somebody, you have to make sure you've chosen the right people to pour into, because there are going to be times that you don't feel like showing up, but there's a difference between you're running on empty, so you're having to show up when you don't feel like it, and that person has drained you just by being your friend. So you have to choose the people carefully that you're going to pour into, choose the right people that are going to accept you, that aren't going to hurt you when you decide to go vulnerable. Make sure you're choosing those people well. And that's another reason I think my friendship circle has always been kind of small. A, because I know my limits on how many people I can pour into at once. I actually have adopted over the last few years this sort of like process of mine where I'm always really working hard on only one friend at a time, like on cultivating one new deep friendship at a time. Did both of you at the same time, and that is how it sounds.
Was that like a lot of work?
That was amazing and totally worth it.
Yes.
It kind of happened. Actually, it did and it didn't. I mean, I knew Chelsea before I knew Amanda. It kind of didn't happen at the same time, which was good because it's, you know, it's the whole thing. Once we were solid, it actually gave me more confidence in my ability to maintain, to find, develop, and maintain deep friendships. And I was like, oh, I can do this. But I also notice I only want to do this with one person at a time because it's a hell of a lot of work, you know?
But it is like you did really invest in that time to build that foundation, you know? And that's true because like, and you and I are a perfect example, Heather, because for a couple of years, even though we lived in different states, we were like connected at the hip. You know what I mean? Like we were on the phone all the time and like really, really involved in each other's like business and all that stuff. And like now that's not the case. You know what I mean? But it's totally fine because we're so connected. We're so connected. We already have that foundation. When we get together, it's like no time has passed. And it doesn't like, I'm guessing like it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that we're less of friends. It doesn't mean any of those things. You know what I mean?
Right. But because we've developed, because I have friendships where when we don't talk for a while, I do wonder, you know, so, but I didn't pour into them like we poured into each other. So yeah, it does matter the work that we have done.
Right.
And it does matter that we chose the right people to do that work with, you know? So I think that just needed to be said because you can't just choose anyone, unfortunately, at this point. You know, you have to choose your people well. And I say that too because I'm thinking of like my own kids who are pretty social, you know, especially compared to me, but their circle of friends is surprisingly small. My daughter has not hung out with a single girlfriend at all yet this summer. And she was mentioning that to me the other day. And part of it is we were gone for 2 weeks. We've been back for 2 and she still hasn't. And I think part of it though, is she's in this place in her life where she doesn't feel connected. Like she has friends, but not, you know, she knows people, but they're not on the level where she trusts them or gets vulnerable with them necessarily. Maybe. I don't know. It's been interesting to kind of watch. She doesn't seem like she feels lonely, but it is an interesting thing that she's just in this place.
I do think there is something to be said for those people who tend to be the anchors and the more steadfast in any kind of friendship circle, like the more mature teenagers. It's a lot probably for Brooke to tolerate a lot of her peers because she's so mature and she does know what she wants and what she doesn't want. I mean, obviously not every person is going to have this perfect potential for you and stuff, but really what you're describing, Heather, when you're talking about Amanda and I, is you're describing friendships that act more like anchors or like rooted trees, basically is what it is. Like you get a seed, you meet someone, and then you guys cultivate this little seed and you plant it together and you water it and roots go really, really deep. And once those roots go deep enough to where you feel like the tree's not going to break in a storm, that's when you can, quote unquote, branch out. That's the writer coming up. That's when you can branch out and start to invest perhaps in other relationships, you know, but getting like a foundational one or two people who you really let know you really let your guard down. That's the big challenge in life for all of us, no matter what our circumstances throughout all of time. But caveat on that, it does take work, and it sometimes takes more work than we think we're supposed to put in because we live in a really kind of a fussy culture, especially generationally. Like we get so fed up with people that we'll just trash our quote unquote friends and go find new friends because we have access to the entire planet now. And so,
well, and because that's what every other meme on Instagram tells you to do is if they don't bring you joy,
and having the enemy feels
like supply and demand,
it feels kind of powerful to be the one that's like, I'm done with you, even though it's false, it's hollow, and it's unhealthy. Sometimes it gives you that sense of like, I'm making great decisions. And sometimes it is a great decision. Sometimes it is healthy. But many times, especially for those of us who aren't quite as comfortable in our own skin, we get so insecure that we cut ties before we get to a place where we could be really hurt, you know, and that's human nature. But we're fussy, and we have to remember that, like, if you want it, if you want these things that you claim to want that you don't know how to get, your first objective needs to be, what am I willing to do to get it? Like, what am I willing to do for it? Am I willing to show up, especially when I don't feel like showing up?
That's one of the reasons that I see people, all these, you know, memes on my feed about just like kicking people out of your life if they don't, whatever. And when did it become that every single person that you are friends with has to agree with everything that you say and do, or what, or that you're not matched, you know?
Right.
So that we don't know. And I think we've talked about this on past episodes before too, that we need to learn how to disagree with each other better.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. It's like, again, in kindergarten, that's how you chose your friends. You both like the color green. Cool. You're best friends. Now, you know, you both don't agree on, I don't know, whatever. It can be your diet. One of you is a vegan and the other one eats meat. It could be anything, but you let that come between relationships or meaningful connections. And it's like, that is not a deciding factor. It doesn't have to be. I mean, we just need to learn how to accept people exactly how they are right now. That's what this goes back to, is learning how to accept people where they are. That's the first step.
One of the biggest things you two have brought up is this idea of commitment. And something that I've noticed with people that I know, especially younger people that I know, they're very flaky. And maybe I attract flaky people. It actually doesn't bother me. I'm so busy when someone cancels on me. I'm actually glad because I have other stuff that I need to do anyway. But I think there is this sense of like, I don't have to keep my word to you. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to show up for you. Like
I don't owe you anything.
I don't owe you anything. And I mean, it's really crazy. And I don't think that's just in friendships. I think that's in a lot of relationships. I think it's in professional relationships, but I don't know when it became, and it's rude. I mean, it's one thing to like cancel last minute. It's another thing to just like never show up and never say anything, which I feel is so common. And I just don't really understand like how that became okay. Like,
well, because we started getting away with it. The world expanded as far as our connection, digitally at least. Or that's what I think. Like, I think that it's kind of like, you know, like we're just sitting in a sea of people now because we have access to so many different demographics all over the planet, and we can get away with it. And if people don't like it or people call us out, we can choose to either ignore them and go on our merry way, or we can choose to kind of categorize them as an enemy or a hater. It's a really popular word. And that makes us feel like we're in the right. So we're kind of like toddlers. We're like fussy little toddlers that are like, I want friends, but I'm not going to share or be nice. And I might wipe my boogers on them. Like, it's not the best. It's going to be hard to make friends, So I don't know. I think we're just getting away with it. And the thing is, there's no accountability coming for us. We are supposed to be our accountability. We as a culture, a civilization, a people, as individuals, there's not going to be some magic parent that shows up and is like, all right, you guys are being ridiculous. I'm going to put you into groups. Those are going to be your besties forever. Although that would be kind of nice.
Wouldn't it?
She would start
not
her
for
own.
Heather. She would rebel against that in a second.
Naturally, I would choose the other group out of spite, but it would still be nice.
We actually do go after what we want when we're told that what we want is something we deserve.
The other thing I think is no doctor has come along to tell us that all of your physical health issues are because you need friends. You know what I mean? Like, I think if people really knew and believed, I mean, there are some that say that, but it's so like woo-woo that it's, nobody's taking it seriously. But if it were really if all of these lonely people that we're talking about, if we really believed and knew in our heart that that was a heavy contributor to our physical and mental health declining, I mean, I would like to believe anyway that would light a fire.
Yes, I would like to believe that too. But you know what? I think that we are almost at a place where some of us at least would almost rather be sick and be physically uncomfortable than be emotionally vulnerable.
And isn't that a product of the problem? Isn't that just, it's another symptom of the issue anyway, then, that we have become so comfortable in our discomfort, for sure. I had a conversation with somebody just last week about this, and I said, it was somebody important to me in my life, and I said, they listed all these things that were wrong, and depression was at the top, and then it immediately went into physical ailments, right? And I just looked at them and I said, can I ask you something? And they said, what? And I said, do you want to get better? Yeah, of course. What do you mean? I'm like, okay, but if you knew that getting better meant actually doing the work, not even just physically, mentally, because we both know that's going to be harder, do you even want to get better if you know what it's going to take? And they had to really think.
Well, because it's safe. It's safe not to.
And that's true.
Right. Because again, now we have a lack of commitment to our own well-being.
And all these things we think we're doing to self-empower, like giving ourselves permission to be the most important person in our lives and giving ourselves permission to blow people off when they disagree with us and blowing people off when they don't say what we want to hear and that because they're not being a good friend anymore. All of that stuff that we think is self-empowerment is really just sabotaging us.
We have to make that commitment to ourselves. And I mean, happiness really lies outside of our comfort zone. When we really stretch ourselves and we show ourselves what we're really capable of at the crucial moment, that's when we can really enjoy our life. And that's when we don't feel these negative kind of emotions like loneliness or anger or fear, is when we can step out and, show up. So we, it is true. And it's kind of like, I always hear this phrase, like, what's your pain point? We all have that pain point. I experienced this recently because with my, with Lonnie being so sick, I've been actually really depressed the last 3 weeks. And it's like, I've been walking around kind of like in a fog, like, okay, I know what I need to do, but I won't actually do it until it gets more painful. You know what I mean? Like it's more painful to stay where I am than to make the effort to do the work. So actually I wanted to read this other statistic, which I found really, really interesting. And it's that 42% of millennial women are more afraid of loneliness than a cancer diagnosis. So that's how scary it is. But here's the thing, and this is what I want to leave you honeys with, is loneliness is something that is so preventable. It really is in our control if we just have the courage to reach out. And I'm not saying it's not going to be scary, and I'm not saying it's not going to be hard, and I'm not saying that someone is not going to disappoint you, because those things will absolutely happen. But what we always, always, always talk about on this show is that on the other side of that, when you finally do find that person that's worth investing in and you grow and cultivate that friendship and you have that meaningful connection on a regular basis, when you can look in each other's eyes and give each other a hug, it is so, so worth it. When you look at one of the 5 regrets of the dying, it's that I didn't spend enough time with the people that I love, right? So let's do that. Let's take the time to spend time with the friends we already have, make new friends where we lack them, and, essentially cure our loneliness. How awesome would that be?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Oh, there's just so much. There's so much in this because it is so big and we're all drowning in it. So there's so many things to say. But for this conversation, first of all, I just want to say out loud that loneliness, that feeling and the sense of loneliness, it goes against our very nature. It goes against our core, our instincts, our gut, our heart. That is by design. We are pack animals. We are not designed to be alone. We are actually designed to be a little bit in pain when we are alone, because biologically speaking, throughout history, it's been a dangerous situation for someone to be without a tribe, without that family or that protection and stuff. So it should be scary and intimidating. Loneliness. It should be something that we don't want to encounter or fully feel. So there's nothing wrong with us being afraid of feeling lonely, because that's built into us. However, fear's not an excuse. I mean, I know we use it as an excuse, but it's really not really ever for anything, right? The fact that we even have a word that means fear is just ridiculous, because fear's not an excuse to not embrace who you are and let yourself have the things you need to flourish, to thrive. Because loneliness is separation from something, or perhaps from everything. And you cannot achieve or accomplish anything without that. You just can't. Even if you do wonderful works within yourself, where is it going? Where does it pour out of? And who do you celebrate with? Feeling lonely, there's nothing wrong with feeling lonely. And actually, feeling lonely is sometimes very important to our personal evolution. Loneliness can be a tool, a temporary tool, used in our lives to help us see ourselves, to help us grow, to help us know what we want and what we don't want. But that being said, and all that aside, I would just say start small, because loneliness is not an option. Like, I understand we're all there right now, but we're dying, we're drowning, and we don't really know how to save one another because we got to save ourselves first. So let's go with the premise that loneliness is not an option. And on that note, I would say start really small. Pick one person, maybe two if you're feeling ambitious, but I would just say start with one person. And you're not going to think about this person as someone who's going to become a friend in your life and contribute or give you anything or be your best pal. You're just going to pick one person that you think you can tolerate. And I want you to go act like a friend to them for a short period. Like, do 15 minutes of conversation that's not about yourself. And it might be like uncomfortable and it might be awkward, whatever. Choose someone that you don't have to see very often if that's the case. I would just say pick one person and practice accepting, practice showing empathy, and practice being a friend. And you might have to do that with 2 people or 3 or 4 or 10 or 12 or 30 until you find the right fit for yourself. But even if that's the case, you will have left 30 people in your wake feeling accepted, loved, empathized with, and not lonely. So until that hole is filled inside you, until you yourself no longer feel loneliness, the only thing we can really do in the meantime is to try to relieve loneliness from someone else. And that's the very nature of the human tribe, or how it's supposed to be at least.
I love that so much. Oh my gosh. I had this like mental picture of, I don't know, just like somebody walking, like power walking, and there's just people in their wake, like just laying there with these like dreamy smiles on their faces, like, oh, I've been accepted, I mean, something that should have looked like this violent, like badass,
right.
Whatever from a movie, but everyone's like, oh, and they're all happy and smiling instead. And it was really nice. So thanks. I love that. Leave a path of acceptance in your wake.
Yes, it is.
I love that so much. Let's all
quotable.
do that. And it's a practical. I don't know. I want to like challenge everybody to do that. It would just be really cool. But I would say everything Chelsea said, plus here's the thing about when you're stuck in that place. It is that the only voice you have left then is that inner voice in your head talking to you, which isn't even the real you. It's your ego reptile brain that's lying to you. It's the voice of isolation, and it's telling you that you deserve to be alone and that you don't deserve to have friends, or that nobody's going to accept you the way you are, or it's this product of all of the hurt that you are sitting in, like Amanda was talking about. And that voice is a lie, but it's really, really hard to shut that voice off long enough to do any of the things that Chelsea just said. And so the first step is always going to be that you have to do the work. And I wonder sometimes if, like the conversation that I mentioned last week, if there's a lot of people who are so deeply stuck in their loneliness that they're scared of or don't want to do the work anymore. And so you have to first do the work. And if doing the work by yourself is possible, cool. But for a lot of us, it's not once you get to that place. And so I'm just a big, big proponent for therapy. And so if you don't have a friend that you can talk to and you need a professional to talk to, then please do that, because sometimes that's the only way to separate the isolation lie voice from the truth. And that separation is the only thing that might be giving you the courage to go out and do the things that Chelsea was talking about, to go befriend somebody and make it about them and not you. Because there are two ways to be brave, remember? And the first is to put yourself out there and be vulnerable. And the second is to go and accept somebody else exactly the way they are. So doing the work means that you're going to be able to go out there and accept somebody that the way they are. And that's to me, that's the easier of the two even. And if you are where I think you are, that might still be impossible. So the first thing is to do the work on yourself and to decide that you do deserve great friends and that you are going to make the commitment to people to do the work, to show up when you don't feel like it. You're going to make the commitment to yourself to show up when you don't feel like it, and that it is worth feeling better and that it's worth getting better. And that's hard. That's hard enough. I mean, we can sit here and talk about, like, let's do this to change the world and better our culture and whatever. But when you're in it, I mean, let's be honest, you can't care about that right now because you can't even care about yourself. And I know how that feels. So you have to first really, really care about yourself, and you have to face the pain that you're trying to avoid by not admitting how lonely you are or how bad it is, or that having only friends online is good enough, or, whatever. It's not true. It's not true. So it's a really scary, brave thing that we're asking, that we're hoping that this conversation sparks for a lot of people. Because, if we don't do anything, well, we can see where we're headed. And the three of us are just really passionately convinced that we don't want to go there. And so we're hoping that listening to this episode with us today really made you think about that and take stock of where you are and how badly you want to get better and how much work you're willing to do. And we're here for that. We're here to celebrate you doing that work. We're here to applaud you and cheer you on every step of the way. And we have a whole Facebook group that is also here for you for that, which we already said is an illusion. Yes, but it's a really fun illusion. And so we really want to meet you there. So please come join us there, but don't stop with that. Go find a physical, real life IRL connection to make, and report back and tell us how it went and how many people you left in your acceptance wait. We can't wait to hear about it.
Thank you guys for being my friend. And I love you too.
And Chelsea's crying, so it's officially.
I know. Thank you guys for having this conversation today. And thank you guys for listening today. We're so excited to have you. And we will see you next time on The Raw Honeys. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Raw Honeys podcast. If so, please share it with a friend or post a review. Heather, Chelsea, and I would love to connect with you. Check us out on Instagram at the Raw Honeys, or join our community of honeys on Facebook. Thanks for listening. We wish you nothing but big love.